1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHAFG December 18, 2025 in Gloster, Mississippi, everything is worse since Drax arrived. In Webisode 57DHAFG RAWSEP View 1 Gloster, Mississippi, everything is worse since Drax arrived. 2 COVID vaccines. Nobody puts baby, in this case, COVID-19 vaccines in a black box. Attempts to block access to COVID vaccines have once again failed as the government by the worst people folds under too much critical pressure. 3 medicine, 4 nature, 5 political persuasiveness, 6 RFK Junior lack of knowledge of science and medicine, 7 Trump failing economy, 8 Wisconsin, 9 Chile, 10 United Kingdom, 11 Ukraine. Main content 0 RAWSEP View All roads lead to the European decision to unfreeze Russian assets to aid Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression. Thursday, December 18, 2025, is the decisive day, and the editor of RAWSEP hopes that despite roadblocks such as a Russian lawsuit and reluctance of some countries to take that step, that Europe will successfully unfreeze those Russian assets and use them to decisively defeat Russia on the battlefield in the near future. Trump economic failures hurt all Americans, and his economic failures are built on tariffs that hurt the entire world. RFK Junior blocking or delaying vaccines hurts all Americans and also hurts worldwide health. The words of Thomas Paine from 250 years ago inspire no king's rallies and more actions of resistance to American dictatorship. The attempts at education in science and medicine to MAHA populace may seem useless in the face of ignorant rejection of science and medicine, but Dr. Mike is making the attempt in 2025. The attempt to provide a snapshot of where we are on December 17, 2025 follows. 1 Mississippi air pollution related to wood burning industry. Everything is worse since Drax came here. U.S. residents say wood pellet plant harming their town. Residents of Gloster, Mississippi are suing plant that exports wood pellets to UK and Europe. RAWSEP top excerpt in April 2025 amid complaints from residents. The Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality MDQ denied Drax permission to increase its emissions. The MDQ reversal of that decision in October, allowing the Drax Gloster mill to become a major source of hazardous air pollutants, triggered the lawsuit by Gloster residents against the company RAWSEP View. Although the lawsuit by Gloster residents is not directly industrial wood burning emissions in the UK or about indoor residential wood burning emissions of concern to RAWSEP, this lawsuit points out that communities next to mills supporting industrial wood burning, such as the pellet mills of Mississippi, are subjected to specific types of toxic emissions, such as volatile organic compounds VOCs from milling trees into wood pellets intended for burning. In the UK, at a Drax industrial wood burning plant, this is allowed because subsidies are given for wood burning as renewable energy, which is lumped in with truly clean renewables such as wind and solar as categories which receive subsidies. In reality, burning wood emits at least 2.8 times the CO2 and PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel. Coal burning CO2 from wood burning contributes to global warming and climate change. PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size is the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Wood burning emissions data is also erased from calculations of whether each nation in the world is meeting its climate goals. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian, December 17, 2025, Emit Bioenergy mill opened in 2014 by British energy giant Drax emits large and sometimes illegal quantities of air pollutants, including methanol, acrolein, and formaldehyde, which are linked to cancers and other serious illnesses. When I go out, I can hardly catch my breath. A Gloster, Mississippi woman said everything is worse since Drax came here. The facility churns out billions of wood pellets each year to meet surging overseas demand for sustainable biomass, a renewable alternative to coal. Now Gloster residents are suing Drax, alleging that the company unlawfully exposed people to massive amounts of toxic pollutants. According to the October filing, Drax, one of the biggest players in the world in the booming biomass industry, has turned the UK largest coal power station, a mile-wide complex in rural Yorkshire, into what is essentially an immense wood stove fueled with Mississippi and Louisiana pine. The company, whose Yorkshire plant is among the largest single carbon emitters in the UK, has faced scrutiny and lawsuits in the UK for pollution and workplace safety violations. Its operations in the US are also beginning to draw legal challenges. This case is about holding a multi-billion-dollar foreign corporation accountable for poisoning a small Mississippi community, said an attorney representing the group. When the Gloster plant opened, many in the low-income majority black town of 850 people were optimistic that it would revitalize the local economy, but some residents say it has brought little more than noise, dust, and toxic air. Pellet exports from the U.S. have quintupled, growing from 2 million tons in 2012 to about 10.5 million tons in 2023. According to the U.S. Industrial Pellet Association, most pellets are sent to the UK and Europe, where they are classified as a renewable energy source on par with solar and wind, making wood burning eligible for massive subsidies, low interest loans, and other government incentives. But researchers say the drying, crushing, and cooling processes at the mills emit air pollution that could be contributing to the health problems of nearby residents. Air pollution is magnitudes higher in Gloster, especially with VOCs, volatile organic compounds, said a Brown University epidemiologist. She and a team of researchers set up air pollution monitors in the town and found clouds of VOCs concentrated around the mill and neighboring residential areas. In 2020, the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, following years of prodding from environmental groups, found the Drax Gloster mill was emitting an average of 796 tons of VOCs per year, and more than 3 times the limit allowed under the mill permit, and fined the company $2.5 million. Louisiana officials, too, found that Drax had been breaking several of its air quality rules, and in 2022 reached a settlement. in which Drax paid $3.2 million, admitted no wrongdoing. The settlement was the largest in more than a decade for Louisiana environmental officials, but it appears to be the extent of any serious efforts to rein in the Drax pollution in Louisiana, said an attorney who, in working with the Environmental Integrity Project, reviewed the Drax pollution history in Mississippi and Louisiana in late 2024. Drax agreed to pay $225,000 for exceeding the Gloster mill limits for hazardous air pollutants, particularly for methanol. In April 2025, amid complaints from residents, the MDQ denied Drax permission to increase its emissions. Its reversal of that decision in October, allowing the Drax Gloster mill to become a major source of hazardous air pollutants, triggered the lawsuit against the company. The $6 million in penalties over the past 4 years are a drop in the bucket for Drax. The company raked in $1.4 billion in profits in 2024 and about $1.3 billion in 2023, according to the Drax adjusted earnings reports. Drax is so profitable and so subsidized that it powers through all of this. The fines do not hurt their bottom line. Air monitors installed detected unexpected spikes in VOCs during the night, something that lines up with complaints of residents of foul odors and difficulty breathing after dark. This could indicate pollution dumping during certain hours. The closer children live to the mill, the heavier they were. You do not want your kids playing outside because the air is polluted if they're staying inside. How are they getting physical activity? The company recently expanded a mill in Alabama, established a North American headquarters in Monroe, Louisiana, and opened an office in Houston to lead its carbon capture and sequestration enterprises. Over the past 6 years, the uranium mill alone has produced enough pellets to fill the New Orleans Superdome nearly twice, yet several residents in Gloster and Urania said that output has not revitalized their economies. Each of the 3 large Drax mills in Louisiana and Mississippi employs between 70 and 80 people, a fraction of the workforce supported by many past mills. In Gloster, only 15% of the Drax employees reside in the community, according to the company. Related stories: wood pellet plant in U.S. broke air pollution rules again. The Guardian, May 29, 2023. Burning imported wood in Drax power plant does not make sense, says courting. August 11, 2022. Drax to double wood pellet production with biomass firm purchase. March 31, 2021. 2 COVID vaccines black box threaten nobody, puts baby, in this case COVID-19 vaccines, in a black box. Attempts to block access to COVID vaccines have once again failed as the government by the worst people folds under too much critical pressure. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Dr. Angela Rasmussen, December 17, 2025, a CNN reporter, alleged that U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA under Trump-appointed Marty Makary was likely going to put a black box warning label on COVID vaccines. A black box warning is the strongest warning label of the FDA, intended to inform both patients and prescribers of serious risks associated with taking that drug. Putting a black box warning on COVID vaccines would almost certainly deter people from getting vaccinated and reduce vaccine uptake. Overall, this was completely on brand for the MAHA approach to drug regulation. Use any administrative trickery at your disposal to strip Americans of their access to life-saving vaccines. As for why this was even being considered, it was the result of Senior Advisor for Clinical Science and newly promoted Center for Drug Evaluation and Research CDR Acting Director Tracy Beth Hoke supposedly uncovered data proving that COVID vaccines killed at least 10 children. This mystery data, which nobody has seen or verified, compelled Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research CBR Director Vinay Prasad to feign horror and write a long memo announcing a sweeping restructuring of all vaccine approval processes. This is premature, considering my colleague Jeremy Faust MD reported that the FDA's own analysis did not find 10 deaths in May. Have found none. Fortunately today, FDA Commissioner Marty Makary said that no black box warning was forthcoming for COVID vaccines. At this time, the Makary stated reason was that Prasad thinks maybe the again unverified and probably non-existent deaths were due to the short interval between the first and second doses used in 2020. There is no evidence that these deaths even occurred, much less any that suggest a short 2-3 month interval between doses was somehow deadlier than receiving it. Updated annual shot. This is both encouraging and not. It is good that FDA is not going to slap a black box warning on COVID vaccines based on what so far amounts to child death vibes detected by Hogan. It is also good that this decision appears to have been made after negative press attention, but it is not a relief because they will likely just use a different strategy. What goes in a black box? Black box warnings are not typically used as a way to discourage people from taking a particular type of medication. They are evidence-based warnings, which mean that they are backed by data that is thoroughly reviewed by FDA experts prior to issuing it. They are meant to help inform healthcare providers who will benefit from a drug, and whether those benefits are outweighed by the risks, they help patients make an informed choice about their own health. Here, for example, here is the black box warning on Valium. This tells people that abusing Valium or other benzodiazepines can lead to addiction and can kill you if you take too much or mix them with other intoxicating drugs like opioids or booze. Despite claims of radical transparency and gold standard science, the FDA has been completely opaque. They do not want to show their evidence that vaccines are dangerous because they do not have any. They tell you that FDA had to be reformed because it was so biased and kept too much behind closed doors, but not that FDA is being led by 3 unelected and grossly incompetent political operatives. By refusing to allow a MAHA narrative to go unchallenged, we can stop regulatory decisions that will decrease access to vaccines. By exposing efforts to unfairly deprive people of vaccines, we can deprive MAHA of opportunities to do so by demanding the one thing they fear more than anything else: accountability. 3A medicine, not MAHA untruths, but medical research based on the scientific method controlling blood sugar cut heart disease risk in half study says people who brought their blood glucose down to a normal level had a lower risk of death from heart disease or hospitalization for heart failure after 20 years. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 15, 2025. People with prediabetes who get their blood sugar under control may cut their risk of death from heart disease or heart failure by half, according to new research. Prediabetes, which is estimated to affect 38% of U.S. adults, is a condition in which blood sugar levels are elevated but do not meet the threshold for diabetes. Lowering blood glucose levels is only one component of reducing cardiovascular disease risk. People still need to maintain a healthy weight. Follow a good diet and exercise. Prediabetes is the canary in the coal mine and often a sign of broader metabolic dysfunction. 3B Medicine, New York City. RAWSEP View, not MAHA untruths, but medical research based on the scientific method. From the article headline, Flu cases skyrocket in New York City earlier than expected. The city and surrounding region have some of the highest levels of flu-like illness in the United States. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, December 16, 2025. Flu season has arrived early this year in New York City, with cases climbing dramatically during the past month. New York City and the surrounding areas, including Long Island and North Jersey, had some of the highest levels of flu-like illness in the United States as of December 6, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Emergency rooms across the city reported a marked rise in flu cases. Starting the third week of November, about 22% of New Yorkers outside the city have received a flu shot this season, according to state data in New York City. Just over a quarter of children 6 months and older have received the flu shot this season. The New York City Health Department says that there has been a 6.5% decline in the number of flu shots administered to children compared with the same period last year. No figures on adult vaccination levels in New York City were available. 3C Medicine and Congress healthcare vote. Top House Democrat demands immediate vote on extending healthcare subsidies. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has called on Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker, to immediately allow a vote on legislation to extend Affordable Care Act tax credits for another 3 years. Mike Johnson should bring the bill to the floor immediately, Jeffries wrote on X after a discharge petition to force a vote on the measure over the Johnson objections received the 218 signatures necessary for its success. Thanks to 4 Republican defectors, it is unclear when Johnson will bring the bill up for a vote. While he must do so within a certain period of time, the House is also set to go on recess after tomorrow through the end of the year, and the measure could wind up being considered in January, at which point the ACA tax credits will have expired. Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, has insisted he has not lost control of the House after 4 swing district Republicans joined with Democrats to force a vote on extending the soon-to-expire ACA tax credits for 3 years. The beleaguered Speaker told reporters earlier, "I have not lost control of the House." 3D Medicine and healthcare failure. United Health reduced hospitalizations for nursing home seniors. Now it faces wrongful death claims. A collage combining imagery and documents related to healthcare and insurance. Illustration. Angelica Alzona, Guardian Design. The company says it is protecting nursing home residents by curbing unnecessary hospital transfers. Whistleblowers allege cost-cutting tactics have endangered the elderly. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 17, 2025. 3 nursing home residents died because employees of the American healthcare giant United Health Group helped delay or deny them critical hospital care. 2 pending lawsuits and a complaint to state authorities have alleged the 3 cases involve a United Health partnership initiative that places medical staff from the company direct care unit Optum inside nursing homes to care for residents insured by the company insurance arm. United Health says one of the initiative goals is to protect patients by reducing unnecessary hospital admissions. Those are admissions the insurance giant would otherwise have to pay for. In Georgia, the family of a woman filed a lawsuit alleging that the 58-year-old died because Optum and her nursing home failed to hospitalize her for hours after she started foaming at the mouth and appeared to be having a seizure. In Ohio, the family of a retiree filed a lawsuit claiming that the 70-year-old died after Optum and her nursing home failed to send her to the hospital, though she had suffered a traumatic head injury and began vomiting. In New York, a physician assistant alleged in a complaint to state authorities that a 63-year-old nursing home resident died due to gross negligence by an Optum employee. The employee refused to hospitalize the man despite his kidney failure. According to text messages he says he shared with state investigators. For Nature and Science, how the pandemic lockdowns changed the beak of a songbird. For ecologists, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a remarkable natural experiment in what can happen to wild animals when humans stay home. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 15, 2025. About 20 years ago, the dark-eyed junco, a forest-dwelling sparrow, began to colonize urban Los Angeles. They rapidly diverged from their wildland counterparts, adopting different breeding behaviors and displaying different physical traits, including shorter wings. The urban juncos also developed shorter, stubbier beaks, a shift that may have been driven by a change in diet, but when the UCLA campus shut down during the pandemic, something remarkable happened. The beaks of juncos born on campus reverted to their wildland shape several years later after the pandemic-related restrictions had been lifted. The distinctive urban beak shape returned, researchers reported in a new study on Monday. For ecologists, the COVID-19 pandemic represented a remarkable natural experiment, an opportunity to study what wild animals did when humans stayed home during what has become known as the anthropause. Mountain lions crept closer to cities and sea turtles ventured closer to shore, while birds lowered the volume of their song, scientists have found. But the new study, which was published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, is the first to link the pandemic lockdowns to a change in the physical form of a wild animal population. We were really shocked. The findings highlight how deeply embedded humans are in natural ecosystems and how rapidly our actions can reshape other species in their natural forest habitats. Dark-eyed juncos survive primarily on seeds and insects, but those that live on the UCLA campus have diets that more closely resemble those of the average college student things like cookies, bread, and pizza, but COVID-19 restrictions sharply limited human activity on campus for most of 2020 and 2021. Bird beaks began to change. There was a time lag to the phenomenon. The juncos born in the spring of 2020, shortly after the restrictions first went into effect, had the standard urban style beaks, but those born in 2021 and 2022 had the longer, slimmer beaks, more typical of the wildland juncos. The urban beak shape returned in junco chicks born in 2023 and 2024. The researchers suspect that it was a case of rapid adaptive evolution. When human food became scarce on campus, birds with traditional wildland-shaped beaks might have been better positioned to survive on natural food sources like seeds and more likely to reproduce the following year. 5. Political Persuasiveness. The essay Common Sense by Thomas Paine has long been revered for its bold expression of democratic ideals and its plain spoken language excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. Thomas Paine published Common Sense in January 1776 to help persuade the 13 British colonies to leave monarchy behind and declare independence as they did the following July. 250 years later, the fiery pamphlet written by Paine remains as relevant as ever. Last spring and this fall, demonstrators protesting the actions of President Trump and his administration copied a famous line onto placards in America: "The law is king," to warn Americans against the idea of kingly rule. The most fundamental point Paine wished to make, what we now call the American Revolution, began on April 19, 1775, when British regulars exchanged fire with local militiamen in Lexington and Concord, after which patriots pursued them all the way back to Boston. By July, George Washington was installed across the river in Cambridge as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. For months, it was not clear what the ultimate purpose of this conflict would be. Many delegates at the Continental Congress still favored reconciliation with the king until Paine published Common Sense in Philadelphia on Jan 9, 1776. An irresistible argument for independence had yet to be made to the general public. Washington likely received a copy as soon as a horseman could carry it up. Common Sense went on to become an extraordinary bestseller and arguably the most important pamphlet in American history. Paine claimed that 120,000 copies were sold in 3 months. An estimate puts the number at no more than 75,000 within a year among a population of 3 million people. In place of a king, skeptics wondered who or what would rule. Paine proposed a charter that colonists would write and authorize, which would safeguard certain rights and freedoms for the people. The change of authority that Paine sought is affirmed every time a federal official swears an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States rather than to kneel to a king. Paine was successful partly because the style of his writing was as revolutionary as his ideas. Common Sense created a new political language. Paine drew heavily on John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu, but without ever naming them or quoting their works directly. Paine translated their notions into succinct, strident, and deceptively simple sentences that everyday readers could understand. The first section of Common Sense narrates the origins of government, with a classic Enlightenment experiment asking what was it like in the state of nature before governments were instituted among people. Let us suppose a small number of persons settled in some sequestered part of the earth in a state of natural liberty. Paine wrote, sounding like a schoolteacher, then kings arrive like snakes in the garden. Mankind being originally equals. Paine went on, their equality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. Look at the present race of kings, he declared, and we should find the first of them nothing better than the principal ruffian of some restless gang. Paine used imagery he thought they could relate to ripping up monarchy by the roots. He asserted that William the Conqueror did not establish an honorable origin for English kings when he invaded in 1066. This frank and gritty language is from the tavern, not the library. Paine, who was born in England and did not arrive in the colonies until 1774, slung insults at George III, whom he called the royal brood of Britain. In his depiction of the crimes of the king, we see another reason Common Sense was so effective. Paine recognized the urgency of his historical moment. This assertion retroactively established the birth date and place of the new nation as the previous April at Lexington and Concord. Paine drew a line in the sand and insisted the line had already been crossed. Among his challenges was to activate the outrage and sympathy of people living in 13 discrete colonies not yet united as a nation to make what was happening in Massachusetts matter in Georgia. Paine tried to imagine what a truly united country might feel like. Readers were meant to feel that they shared an interest with all colonists up and down the eastern seaboard. Like many of the founders, Paine offered a vision for the nation that was in some ways quite limited, as was his notion of which kinds of people deserved sympathy. The anger of Paine was against the William the Conqueror seizure of power against the consent of the English natives. Paine did not extend equal sympathy to enslaved people of African descent, although he was less supportive of slavery than many of his peers. The Paine insistence that 18th century Americans can begin the world over again casts the complicated history of a people as a matter to be erased rather than confronted. As the nation prepares to mark the 250th anniversary of independence, it is crucial to ask not whether Common Sense is perfect, but rather what kind of wisdom it offers at this moment. In 1776, Paine looked toward the future right after. Paine declared, in free countries the law ought to be king. Laws in the United States have often been unjust, and just laws have often been unequally enforced. Perhaps Paine understood that the idealistic political experiment he hoped to help launch would always be a work in progress. 6. RFK Junior, RAWSEP View, lack of knowledge of science and medicine versus Dr. Mike, representing medicine, not MAHA on truths, but medical research based on the scientific method. From the article headline, Anti-Vaccine Influencers Are Only Getting Stronger, excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 17, 2025, an illustration featuring a man with a stethoscope handing a microphone to a person wearing a MAHA hat, an A t-shirt with facts crossed out, and holding a book titled Quackery 101. A woman is between them with her hands raised, as if to stop the handoff. This month, Dr. Mikhail Varshavsky, the New Jersey-based family medicine physician and medical social media influencer better known as Dr. Mike, appeared on the popular YouTube channel Jubilee as part of its series surrounded. He debated a bunch of RFK Jr. supporters one at a time. He started with the claim that RFK Jr. is decimating public health and should step down as Secretary of Health and Human Services. And then the RFK Jr. supporters challenged Dr. Mike for almost 2 hours. He does a magnificent job of calmly and clearly explaining the benefits of putting fluoride in tap water, as well as the basics of the scientific method. From my perspective, the supporters of RFK Jr. do not have a good grasp of the science behind the points they are arguing. And while there is truth to some of the facts they recite, these facts are warped beyond recognition or taken out of context. While the RFK Jr. fans are very skeptical of Big Pharma, they do not extend that skepticism to Big Wellness, even though Dr. Mike encourages them to. In spite of the excellent performance of Dr. Mike, most of the RFK Jr. fans appear inured to the reasoning of the doctor, digging deeper into their own beliefs and support for the man they call Bobby. In a clip that Jubilee posted to Instagram, one of the RFK Jr. supporters involved in the debate jumped into the comments to continue to spar with people and disagree with Dr. Mike. Watch the whole episode. One thing, he got destroyed. He did not deny any facts I brought. In June, I wrote a column in which I suggested that public debates like these could be a useful way to rebuild the trust of Americans in vaccines. I thought of this as a kind of sunshine effect, encourage these views to be aired in the open where they can be debunked directly, but I changed my mind about it this year. While I commend Dr. Mike for fighting the good fight, I no longer believe that debating the RFK Jr. Make America Healthy against stalwarts is going to build trust back up. This kind of format, in which someone with real scientific expertise is put on the same level as an impassioned layperson, is not going to work. As long as RFK Jr. is in office. As of December 12th, there were 126 confirmed cases of measles in an ongoing outbreak in South Carolina, and 119 of those cases were among unvaccinated people. Almost all of the people affected were under 18. The United States is on track to lose its measles elimination status, while a vast majority of parents are still giving their children basic childhood inoculations. Anti-vaccine influencers continue to chip away at the trust of the public. According to a KFF Washington Post survey of 2,716 parents polled between July and August, nearly half, 45% of parents who have skipped or delayed vaccines for their children aside from COVID-19 or flu say they have seen content related to vaccines for children online. 6B RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine when patients lose faith in medicine. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. To the editor, my patient was making a fatal decision and I could not stop him. Opinion guest essay. December 5th, 2025. As a physician, I admire the doctor writing sensitively on the challenges and dilemmas physicians face in this case, dealing with patients and families who have a deep distrust of doctors and medicine. It seems apparent that the young man who refused the advice of the doctor to allow the implantation of a pacemaker would have refused any available life-prolonging intervention. But this story is not just about this patient. It illustrates something larger going on in our society as well. In his 2004 book, How Mumbo Jumbo Conquered the World, describes the flight from reason that was taking place in every area of human endeavor. By now, 21 years later, conspiracy theories and nonsense have become so pervasive that one is obliged to frequently reorient sanity. Anger at authority, along with its attendant acting out of hostile fantasies, is no longer the sole province of toddlers. It has become, thanks to our current political environment, accepted and normalized. Letter to the editor. Being a physician would be easy if patients always followed our advice, but the right of a parent to choose includes making a decision different from the one the physician believes is best. RAWSEP interjection. What if a parent makes the decision to not vaccinate their children? Is it ethical for a physician to make no effort to change the mind of the parent? Back to the article excerpt. The hospital can be overwhelming to patients. If a patient refused a procedure I recommended, I acted within the limits that patient allowed. Asking family members to intervene was complicated. At times the family members argued among themselves or insisted that I follow their wishes, and the situation became messy. A death is a tragedy. 7. A Trump failing economy. U.S. lost 105,000 jobs in October and added 64,000 in November, according to delayed data. The data shows the headline unemployment rate continued to climb and hit 4.6%, a 4-year high last month. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 16, 2025. The U.S. labor market grew by more than expected last month, recovering some of the damage inflicted by the federal government shutdown. According to official data, an estimated 105,000 jobs were lost in October and 64,000 were added in November. An anticipated report showed on Tuesday jobs growth was higher in November than anticipated by many economists, with a consensus forecast of some 40,000 jobs added, but the headline unemployment rate continued to climb and hit 4.6%, a 4-year high last month amid apprehension around the strength of the U.S. economy. Previous estimates for overall jobs growth in August and September were also downgraded from a drop of 4,000 to 26,000 and from growth of 119,000 to 108,000 respectively. The latest jobs numbers, typically released monthly, were delayed due to the government shutdown. Federal government jobs declined by 162,000 in October and 6,000 in November. 7B Trump failing economy, cooling labor market, and elevated inflation stoke Fed divisions. Fed officials explained their opposition to the decision of the central bank this week to cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 12, 2025. Officials at the Federal Reserve shed further light on Friday on the divisions that led to the fractured decision this week to lower interest rates, with views splintering over the risk posed by inflation and how concerned to be about a softening labor market. The central bank voted to cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point for a third meeting in a row, a decision that was far from unanimously supported. Two members of a policy-setting Federal Open Market Committee voted for no cut, while 4 others expressed their disapproval by registering what is known as a soft dissent. President Trump has vowed to pick someone who will support substantially lower interest rates, but ongoing divisions at the Fed underscore how difficult it may be to deliver that almost all of the current roster of presidents from the 12 regional reserve banks was unanimously reappointed on Thursday to new 5-year terms by the board. Trump is currently engaged in a legal battle with Lisa D. Cook, a governor he is trying to fire over allegations that she committed mortgage fraud. The Supreme Court will hear that case in January. 7C Trump failing economy. Utilities heating costs expected to rise 9.2% this winter. Colder weather and rising electricity and fuel costs will lead to a big jump in costs for individuals, according to estimates from a group representing state energy officials. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. Consumers already tapped out from rising home energy costs face yet another strain on their pocketbooks. Surging heating costs, higher electricity and natural gas prices, coupled with forecasts for unusually cold temperatures across parts of the country, are expected to drive up bills as winter takes hold. The average U.S. household is projected to spend nearly $1,000 this winter to heat its home, up 9.2% from a year earlier, according to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, which represents state governments in securing federal money. Even as costs rise, the federal government is offering states less money to help low-income residents pay for heat. The budget for a critical federal program has been cut by about a third this year compared with 2 years ago. Democratic lawmakers have repeatedly blamed Trump for rising energy costs, saying he has blocked or stalled numerous wind and solar projects which typically produce electricity at much lower cost than fossil fuel power plants. They add that his embrace of companies involved in AI could drive up energy costs by sharply increasing demand for energy and spending on grid upgrades that are paid for by all utility customers. The Energy Directors Group said residents of states in the Northeast are experiencing the highest heating cost increases. These states mostly have Democratic governors, and colder weather states in the South and Southwest tend to have lower cost increases. The group said these states mostly have Republican governors and milder winters. 7D Trump failing economy. U.S. unemployment rate rises, a warning sign for economy. Employers added 64,000 jobs in November, according to data delayed by the government shutdown. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.6%, the highest level in 4 years. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 16, 2025. The unemployment rate rose in November, a warning sign for the health of a labor market that has been strained by federal layoffs and rising costs. The jobless rate last month rose to 4.6%, up from 4.4% in September, the last month for which officials had a full picture of the labor force before the weeks-long government shutdown. It is the highest unemployment rate since September 2021, when the economy was emerging from the pandemic, and an increase from 4.0% in January. Employers added 64,000 jobs in November, partly reversing a decline in October. The federal government has lost 168,000 jobs over the past 2 months as workers hit by deferred resignations came off the payroll. Wage growth has also slowed notably to a level not seen since 2021, a measure that comes at a time when an increasing number of Americans are expressing pessimism about the economy. Digging into those numbers a little more, manufacturing lost 5,000 jobs in November. So far, the sector has not appeared to benefit from the Trump trade war, which he and his administration have argued will bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. 7E Trump failing economy. Next Fed chair in no-win scenario. As selection process draws to a close, the person picked to replace Jerome H. Powell will be thrust into a credibility problem that will be difficult to escape. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. It was always going to be one of the Kevins, at least. That was the impression among many across Wall Street and Washington when it came to the Trump selection for the next chair of the Federal Reserve. That placed Kevin A. Hassett, a longtime loyalist and economic advisor to Trump, and Kevin M. Warsh, a former Fed governor who had been in spitting distance of becoming chair during the Trump first term, in leading positions to take over for Jerome Powell. In May, the decision comes down to who Trump believes will be more successful in delivering the substantially lower borrowing costs that he has long struggled to get from the Fed under Powell. Will the new chair be just as unflappable as Chair Powell and be able to cut through the criticism and make the decisions that are best for the economy and its people? She asked. That is the greater test of a Fed chair than if they can please the president. 7F Trump failing economy. White House shrugs off rise in unemployment rate. The Trump administration looked to recast elements of a dour jobs report Tuesday as a sign of strength. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 16, 2025. The White House on Tuesday sought to recast a dour November jobs report as a sign of economic progress, shrugging off an uptick in the U.S. unemployment rate and other potential hints of weakness now looming over the economy. Top aides to President Trump instead argued that the data showed a nation still on track and poised to grow substantially next year as they forged ahead with their new campaign to assuage voters anxious about their finances. Construction jobs did rise by about 28,000 in November, the data showed, but manufacturing jobs fell by about 5,000 and jobs in transportation and warehousing declined by more than 17,000. In fact, the government found that wage growth slowed to 3.5% In November, the figure suggested that many Americans may not feel the benefit of bigger paychecks at a moment when prices remain stubbornly high. 8. Wisconsin judge allows election case to proceed against Trump advisors. A judge ruled that at least 2 of 3 defendants would have to stand trial in a case stemming from a plan to deploy fake electors after Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election. Wisconsin is one of 5 states that brought criminal charges related to the 2020 Trump campaign efforts to circumvent the outcome of the vote. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 15, 2025. A Wisconsin judge ruled on Monday that there was sufficient evidence for 2 men to face trial on charges that they illegally tried to keep President Trump in power after his 2020 election loss. The 2 defendants are James Trupies, a lawyer and former judge who is accused of being an architect of the plan to deploy fake electors in a number of states that Trump lost, and Mike Roman, a top staff member in the 2020 Trump campaign. The preliminary hearing for a 3rd defendant, Kenneth Casebro, another lawyer who also faces charges, was delayed amid questions of whether statements he had made to investigators were admissible. The defendants faced 11 forgery-related charges in connection with the drafting of false elector certificates representing an alternative outcome to the Wisconsin presidential election that year when Trump lost to Biden. 9. Chile presidential election result is more than just a swerve to the right. The Guardian, December 17, 2025. General Augusto Pinochet, the strongman who imposed a reign of terror on Chile from 1973 to 1990, must be smiling in his grave. His brazen defender and admirer Jose Antonio Cast has just been elected president of Chile. Cast, a right-wing politician who has praised the military dictatorship and once said that if Pinochet were alive, he would have voted for me. Won by an overwhelming margin on Sunday, beating his center-left opponent by about 16 points. It is the first time since democracy in Chile was restored 35 years ago that any supporter of the dictatorship has won such high office. The Cast victory is not necessarily a public endorsement of his veneration for Pinochet. His campaign promises appealed to an angry, weary, and confused populace eager for radical change. A vow to expel hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants. A crackdown on crime and narco-trafficking. A pledge to slash government spending and boost economic growth. What Chile needs now is a deep intellectual renewal of its progressive forces. A painful reckoning with its shortcomings and fractures. How well the Chilean opposition responds to this sobering defeat will determine whether Cast truly represents an ominous swerve toward the current desolate panorama of would-be dictators around the world, or whether he proves a mere parenthetical in the Chile erratic but perpetual advance toward freedom and justice. 10. United Kingdom businesses owned by China automobiles on British roads. Chinese cars are racing ahead. BYD, Chery, and other Chinese automakers are winning over drivers in Britain, where tariffs are low and buyers are open to new brands. Cars made in China are attracting a fast-growing number of buyers in Britain, drawn by the price and features. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. On a recent Monday, Dougal Keith drove an electric car out of his dealership in Leeds in northern England and hit the accelerator. The car, a Chinese-made BYD Seal Excellence, can reach 60 miles per hour in 3.8 seconds. A key selling point. Another is the price tag, about £48,000, $64,400, which is 20% cheaper than a top-range Tesla Model 3. Keith, who has been selling cars for more than 4 decades, said customers were skeptical of buying vehicles made in China when he opened a showroom in 2023 for BYD, the largest automaker in China. Now he has 6 dealerships devoted to the brand. Encouraged by the success of his BYD dealerships, this month Keith opened 2 locations to sell cars made by Chang'an, a Chinese state-owned automaker. Next year, Keith expects sales at his company, which runs 28 dealerships selling a variety of global brands, to hit about £500 million, more than 50% higher than in 2024, boosted by the demand for Chinese cars. In September, the BYD dealership in Leeds sold more cars than any of his other dealerships in the area. It is pretty good going for a brand that 2 years ago nobody had heard of, he said. Image: a broad, undeveloped area with a stream and a swath of forest. The countryside in the Derbyshire Peak District National Park. BYD, which promotes longer-range batteries, has attracted buyers who want to drive long distances without stopping and charging for long. 10b. United Kingdom Russian threat. UK spy chief warns of acute Russia threat. The frontline is everywhere. In her first public speech as head of MI6, Blaise Metroweli said Russia was attempting to export chaos to Europe through hybrid attacks and disinformation. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 15, 2025. The new spymaster of the British Secret Intelligence Service warned on Monday that Russia posed an acute threat to the West, plotting arson and sabotage operations, assassinations, and cyber and drone attacks across Europe. The new frontline is everywhere, said the chief, Blaise Metroweli, who in October became the first woman to lead the agency, known as MI6, after a career as an intelligence agent. Metroweli kept her remarks focused on Russia. She referred to China, which Britain has characterized as a national security threat, in a single phrase, as a central part of the global transformation taking place this century. She also said nothing about the United States, despite a long intelligence-sharing relationship between MI6 and the CIA, an arrangement that has come under question with the return of Trump. Metroweli did refer to the Five Eyes, a group of allies: Australia, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States, whose agencies share intelligence. If anything, Metroweli suggested that Britain needed to rely more on itself, with the pillars after World War II security under pressure, and as she put it, new blocks and identities forming and alliances reshaping our world is more dangerous and contested now than for decades, Metroweli said, describing describing an interlocking web of security challenges military, technological, social, ethical, even each shaping the other in complex ways. We are living in a space between peace and war, she said. 10C United Kingdom alliance with Europe, again a warning for Keir Starmer from his own past. If you are not bold on Brexit, in Europe your Labour rivals will believe support is falling. That is an opportunity the PM should seize before pro-Europe challengers for the Labour leadership do. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501. C3 nonprofit organization The Guardian. December 17, 2025, 7 years ago, it took just 8 words to electrify the Labour conference and to show the party was falling out of love with its then leader, although not exactly the kind of soaring oratory that gets reproduced on t-shirts. The words were greeted with wild cheering as most of the hall was on their feet and cheered. Keir Starmer, then Brexit spokesman, was not really accustomed to his speeches having such an effect. All he had said was nobody is ruling out Remain as an option, but context is everything. During that darkly divisive time of 2018, departing from his agreed text in this way was always going to be seen as laying down the gauntlet to Jeremy Corbyn, who was trying to prioritize Leave supporters in working class seats over the instincts favorable to Europe of his Labour Party. In just one speech, this grey-suited shadow Brexit secretary was transformed, if only for a while, into a risk-taker who would stand up for most Labour MPs, members, and voters against the leader he would later replace, who are Keir Starmer Labour rivals in 2025. One Wes Streeting, who just about everyone assumes would be a candidate in any leadership election, is among a clutch of cabinet ministers letting it be known they want to go further on Europe. Aides to Angela Rayner, another probable runner in a contest to replace Starmer, insist she will not discuss her position on a customs union because it would only escalate unhelpful speculation. The danger is obvious if Starmer rules out more meaningful steps towards a close relationship with the EU. He allows rivals to occupy the space where the overwhelming majority of Labour MPs, members, and voters are to be found. I happen to be someone who both wants him to survive and believes he can do so in spite of all this overheated speculation, but it would be prudent of him to remember the impact just a few words had for him 7 years ago. There are options for a big offer on Europe that the Prime Minister should not rule out. 10D United Kingdom luxury business falling sales at Stella McCartney fuel fears over fashion label. Future directors blame challenging market conditions as losses widen from £25 million in 2024 to £33 million. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025, sales at the Stella McCartney fashion label sank by more than a quarter last year, tipping it further into the red and adding to fears it could run out of money by 2028 before tax losses at the British brand, led by the daughter of former Beatle, Sir Paul McCartney, widened to £33.6 million in 2024 from £25 million the year before, while sales fell 27% to £16 million, according to accounts filed at Companies House. The latest loss comes after the brand directors warned it could run out of cash by 2028, even if its parent company, Annan Star Holding, which is controlled by the designer, did not call in its loans. The label has not made a before-tax profit since 2017 and has warned for several years about a need for additional funding to keep going. Directors said the company, which is known for its ethical stance and not using animal products, had identified contingency measures to spin out cash reserves for longer, but admitted they may consider alternative sources of funding to secure the long-term viability of the business. The Stella McCartney brand, whose vegan handbags sell for nearly £1,000, said sales rose in the UK and in its stores last year, but that was offset by a decline in royalty and wholesale income. Luxury labels struggled last year, with even their comfortable clientele forced to economize amid the rising cost of living and Chinese shoppers reigning in spending. British labels such as Burberry have also blamed slower UK sales on the previous government decision to end tax breaks for tourists. McCartney bought back a 49% stake in her eponymous brand in January this year that had been controlled by luxury conglomerate LVMH. Before that deal, the label was independent for just over a year after McCartney ended a 17-year partnership with rival luxury conglomerate Kering, the owner of Gucci, and bought back its 50% stake in her brand. McCartney, whose late mother was the photographer and animal rights activist Linda McCartney, designed her first jacket as a teenager. After work experience at Christian Lacroix, she rose to become the creative director of the Parisian fashion house Chloe, before starting her own label in a joint venture with Kering in 2001. 10E United Kingdom, The Guardian view on the Trump BBC lawsuit. Grievance politics. With a purpose editorial, the U.S. president has repeatedly targeted American media in an attempt to muzzle debate and scrutiny. His attempt to export the bullying must be resisted. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 16, 2025, on the day that the government launched a high-stakes consultation to consider fresh ways of funding the BBC in the digital era. The corporation could have done without another difficult news event of its own, the Trump decision to follow through on threats to sue over the content of a Panorama program broadcast in October 2024 may not have come as a surprise given the Trump litigious record in the United States, but it will add to the general air of beleaguerment at the corporation and further embolden its domestic political enemies. 11A Ukraine. Europe using Russian frozen assets this week is pivotal for Ukraine and for the voice in its future of Europe, often left out by the United States in peace negotiations. European countries are working to assert their leadership and bolster Ukraine with an ambitious funding plan, but can they agree? Photo of Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany, Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, and President Emmanuel Macron of France at a meeting in London this month. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 16, 2025. For months, European countries have struggled to agree on a bold proposal to finance Ukraine and its war effort now as the United States is racing ahead to try to end the war started by Russia nearly 4 years ago. European leaders are working feverishly to finalize that funding plan. They hope it will help ensure that they have a seat at the table as negotiations intensify, and that Ukraine is in as strong a position as possible to make a deal. It is also a chance for the European Union to forcefully disprove the Trump depiction of the 27-nation bloc as weak and indecisive. On Thursday, that resolve will be put to the test when European leaders meet to decide if they can agree on a plan to use the assets of Russia frozen in Europe to back a loan that would help Ukraine fund the war and its government for the next 2 years. But with just days to go, obstacles to an agreement remain as Belgium in particular expresses persistent doubts what was meant to be a show of strength could still turn into a display of disunity and weakness at a diplomatically pivotal moment. Is Europe willing to do what it takes? It is very much a moment for Europe to stand up and be counted, said a senior fellow at Bruegel, an economic think tank in Brussels. This is a point of maximum danger after months of struggling to gain a voice in negotiations. European leaders did seem to find a toehold in meetings this week, the most extensive negotiations on ending the fighting since Russia invaded Ukraine. Top officials from some of the close European allies of Ukraine, including Finland, France, and Germany, as well as from the European Union leadership, spent hours on Sunday and Monday discussing plans to end the war, rebuild the economy, and secure against another invasion. Figuring out financing for Ukraine could be key not only to supporting Kyiv, but also to securing the Europe's continued influence in a diplomatic fight European leaders see as central to their own future security. It would serve, analysts say, as a sort of turning point for shoring up the Europe's geopolitical importance in a fraught era of it. Aggressive Russia and a transactional United States. The notion that the Europe future is being decided by Russia and the United States, galls at the conclusion of the whirlwind meetings Monday. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Union executive arm, pointed to the funding plan as a priority on the path toward peace. The needs of Ukraine are both immense and urgent, she said in a statement, calling the discussions on Thursday a decisive moment if Europe can agree to it. The loan in question would use about 210 billion euros, about $245 billion in Russian government assets frozen in Europe, to back 90 billion euros in zero-interest loans to Ukraine over the next 2 years. That would fill 2/3 of the Kyiv estimated financing needs, with the potential for more money later. Ukraine would need to pay the loan back only if Russia paid reparations for the war. A depository in Brussels that holds about 185 billion euros of immobilized Russian state assets. The Russian central bank recently said that it had filed a lawsuit in Moscow against the depository. But while the loan plan has many positives, offering Kyiv the resources to keep fighting and allowing Europeans to support Ukraine without turning to their own overburdened budgets, the idea also comes with major risks. Both the government of Belgium, where most of the assets are held, and some outside financial experts have warned that the plan could spook foreign investors, making them nervous about stashing their savings in Europe. Continued reluctance was on display last week, even as member states agreed on Friday to indefinitely freeze Russian assets held in the bloc, a first step toward making a loan to Ukraine. Using those funds, Belgium, Bulgaria, Italy, and Malta did so grudgingly. As negotiations speed up, Russia is making its own moves to scuttle the proposal. The Russian central bank said on Friday that it had filed a lawsuit in Moscow against the Belgian depository that holds about 185 billion euros of the immobilized Russian state assets. Given the threat of continued legal action, Belgium is asking other European nations to share the risk. It has insisted that pots of money from elsewhere should also be used in the plan. Smaller sums are held in Britain and France, among other places. If you go together, then you are under a big umbrella, and you are not the only one that is exposed to all the risks, the Prime Minister of Belgium said after he met with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, in London on Friday. That London meeting appeared to produce no breakthroughs. In a statement, the Starmer office said only that the two leaders had agreed to continue to work together closely on the issue. The Trump administration position also looms over negotiations. Washington has at times signaled interest in using the frozen assets as part of a peace deal. In a 28-point plan that leaked last month, the White House suggested unfreezing the Russian assets and using part of the money for a joint Russian-American investment program. Europeans balked at that and are rushing to show that they can make use of the funds to help Ukraine themselves. The money was referred to again in statements after the meetings in Berlin on Monday, though exactly what was discussed was not clear. There is a political goal here to make sure that those reserves are put to productive use, said the managing director for Europe at the Eurasia Group, a research firm in Paris and Berlin, and in Brussels. They are using that threat to put pressure on Belgium. The question is whether it will work. Ambassadors from across the European Union vetted the text of the frozen asset plan until nearly midnight on Monday, and Belgium was still pushing for more assurances that it would not be left exposed. Those discussions are expected to go down to the last moment. A man who will preside over the meeting of leaders on Thursday as president of the European Council has said that talks will continue until some agreement to fund Ukraine is reached. Should the bloc fail to come up with a financing plan, he said, it would be a complete political and moral failure that would put Ukraine in an incredibly vulnerable position. 11b Ukraine. Europe using Russian frozen assets. Ukraine plan calls for enhanced military with U.S. and European backup. The latest proposal is designed to deter future Russian aggression, but Russia is not part of the talks and has shown little willingness to negotiate. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 16, 2025. The U.S. European plan to secure Ukraine against future Russian attacks once the current war ends calls for a more robust Ukrainian military, the deployment of European forces inside that country to deter another invasion, and increased use of American intelligence, according to officials familiar with drafts of two security documents that detail the proposal. American and European diplomats meeting with the Ukraine leaders over the past 2 days in Berlin have mostly signed off on the security guarantees, the officials said publicly, and privately. U.S. officials said that Trump had agreed to submit the security guarantees to the Senate, where treaties are typically ratified, though they did not make clear whether they would formally submit the guarantees as a treaty. Zelensky said early Tuesday that the documents would be finalized in the coming days and that he expected American officials to then convey it to Russia and meet with Ukrainian negotiators after that, perhaps this weekend. 11C Ukraine says it hit a submarine with underwater drones as it tried to demonstrate its continuing ability to fight. Ukraine said it had used drones to inflict serious damage on a Russian Kilo-class submarine at a Black Sea port. The New York Times, December 15. 2025 Ukrainian underwater drone struck a Russian submarine for the first time on Monday, causing critical damage to the vessel and making it the first publicly acknowledged use of the new class of Ukrainian weapons. According to the Ukraine Domestic Intelligence Agency, at the time of the attack, the Kilo-class submarine was docked in a Russian Black Sea port near the city of Novorossiysk and carried 4 launchers for caliber cruise missiles, which Moscow regularly uses to attack across Ukraine. The agency said Kilo-class vessels are not nuclear-powered and do not carry nuclear-armed ballistic missiles. Russia confirmed the attack, but denied that its submarine had been damaged. While Ukraine claimed the strike on Monday was the first time it had struck a submarine with sea drones, it was not the Ukraine's first attack on a Russian submarine. Ukraine previously struck another Kilo-class submarine, the Rostov-on-Don, twice with missiles, while it was docked in Crimean ports, first in September 2023 and again in August 2024. It said the vessel had been damaged beyond repair. 11D Ukraine Europe using Russian frozen assets. The Zelensky dilemma: how much must Ukraine cede to make peace? 2 days of talks between President Volodymyr Zelensky and allies have brought some progress on security guarantees, but Russia remains opposed to any foreign forces in Ukraine. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 16. 2025 President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine expressed a tense and wary optimism on Tuesday about proposed guarantees for the Ukraine future security, so long as they were detailed and confirmed by the U.S. Congress. But what might make them acceptable to Ukraine, he suggested, would prompt Russia to reject them. Zelensky spoke after 2 days of peace proposal talks with U.S. and European negotiators who had emphasized progress on Monday and promoted what they called a NATO-like security agreement. Zelensky acknowledged that the United States had gone a long way to spelling out what kind of security guarantees it might offer Ukraine in any peace deal, but he added that significant details had still to be worked out. 11E Ukraine Europe using Russian frozen assets. Putin calls European leaders little pigs as he insists Russia will achieve its goals in Ukraine by diplomacy or force. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 17, 2025. Meanwhile, Putin of Russia on Wednesday lashed out at European leaders, saying Russia would achieve its territorial goals in Ukraine either through diplomacy or by military force. Putin said the aims of what Moscow calls its special military operation would be met unconditionally. If they do not want a substantive discussion, he said, then Russia will liberate its historical lands on the battlefield. The Putin hardline comments came as U.S. officials claimed that earlier talks with Ukraine and Berlin had resolved about 90% of the most difficult issues, but major doubts remain over whether the Russian leader is prepared to compromise on his sweeping demands. Putin has repeatedly insisted that Kyiv cede the remaining parts of the eastern Donbass region still under Ukrainian control, a demand that the White House has at times appeared to endorse, but which Ukraine has flatly rejected. Moscow has also pushed for strict limits on the Ukraine military, a ban on Western troops on Ukrainian territory, and an end to Western military support. The Russian leader on Wednesday also denied that Moscow was planning to invade NATO territory, claiming instead that the alliance had begun preparing for a possible military confrontation with Russia with a view to 2030. Mers of Germany says he will work with EU partners to alleviate concerns on use of frozen Russian assets. Mers calls for EU move on frozen assets to put pressure on Russia as he warns against the Moscow ambitions. The EU use of Russian funds that are frozen needs solid legal basis or we risk handing Putin victory. Maloney warns confiscating Russian assets to fund Ukraine would be declaration of war. Orban of Hungary warns who stands where on EU reparations loan for Ukraine. 11F Ukraine Europe using Russian frozen assets. Putin thinks democracy is the weakness of the West. We have to prove him wrong. Raphael Bear, the Russian strategy of exporting chaos to provoke extremism only works if liberals succumb to cynicism and despair. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 17, 2025. I once spent an exasperating week showing a Russian friend around London. He insisted on seeing everything and admiring nothing. Museums, monument shops, all compared unfavorably with St. Petersburg and Moscow. This got tiresome after a few days, so I asked my friend if there was anything at all about Britain that impressed him. The stability, he said, without hesitation. You can feel the stability. That was a different world. The late 1990s. I do not remember the year, but I remember knowing what my friend was talking about because I had felt the same culture shock in reverse when first visiting Russia. It was the decade of degenerate democracy under Boris Yeltsin. The Soviet Union had collapsed. It was not obvious where the unraveling would stop. Criminal violence was endemic. The drunk president was propped up by a lawless oligarchy pillaging state assets and calling it privatization. Soviet power was unaccountable, but at least predictable. Vladimir Putin is as crooked as everyone else who rose to the top in the entourage of Yeltsin, but he restored order and national self-esteem, which mattered more to most Russians than the slow suffocation of political freedom. It is not a familiar dilemma to British voters because democracy and stability have not seemed mutually exclusive. Our multi-party system allows peaceful rivalry between different political and economic interests. The opposition can become the government without bloodshed. The defeated regime yields without fear of retribution under conditions of rules-based competition. Democracies can accommodate dissent before it turns to revolution that makes them innovative and resilient. It is how free societies outperform tyrannies and won the 20th century. Vengeful dictatorship wants a rematch. Putin thinks he can turn the strength of the West into its greatest vulnerability. An authoritarian megalomaniac sees merit in a political system if it raises no obstacle to the will of the leader. He therefore sees liberal democracy as stupid and weak. A deep well of resentment that fuels the export of chaos by Putin. Sowing discord and shredding consensus is meant to rob Western societies of the stability that was once their superpower. In the ultimate vindication for Putin, the moral lesson of the Cold War will be inverted. Instead of authoritarian regimes crumbling because their captive subjects crave freedom, it will be demoralized citizens of failing liberal Societies turning to strong leaders for order. The realization of that dark fantasy can seem plausible, especially given the spectacle of the Trump misrule in the US that has to be our spur to vigilance in Europe. In the end, dictators always underestimate the resilience of societies governed by law and institutions because they cannot believe in a system that is stronger than the rule of one man. 11G Ukraine Trump failing economy conquered by European business success, not based on artificial intelligence. RAWSEP View, the true European secret weapon, is using Russian frozen assets to aid Ukraine in winning the war. From the article headline, is the secret weapon of Europe against Trump. It could burst his AI bubble. Growth in the US economy and the political survival of Trump rest on AI. The EU must use its leverage and stand up to him. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian, December 17, 2025. The unthinkable has happened. The US is the adversary of Europe. The stark, profound betrayal contained in the Trump administration national security strategy should stop any further denial and dithering in the capitals of Europe, cultivating resistance. The current trajectory of Europe and European nations is now the stated policy of the Washington of Trump, but contained within this calamity is the gift of clarity. Europe will fight or it will perish. The good news is that Europe holds strong cards. The US bet on AI is now so gigantic that the pension of every mega voter is bound to the precarious survival of the AI bubble. AI investment now rivals consumer spending as the primary creator of American economic growth. It accounted for virtually all 92% GDP growth in the first half of this year. Without it, U.S. GDP grew only 0.1%. Despite the Trump posturing, he is on shaky economic ground. The Trump political coalition is shaky too. In July and again this month, he has been unable to force Senate Republicans to pass his AI moratorium bill, which would have prevented states from drafting their own AI laws. The Steve Bannon wing of MAGA fears that AI will displace workers in large numbers and is appalled by what children are exposed to on digital platforms. MAGA voters particularly mistrust the political power of big tech. Big tech is a dangerous topic for Trump. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has two cards to play that might pop the AI bubble. First, Dutch company ASML commands a global monopoly on the microchip etching machines that use light to carve patterns on silicon. These machines are essential for NVIDIA, the AI microchip giant that is now the most valuable company in the world. ASML is one of the Europe's most valuable companies, and European banks and private equity are also invested in AI. Withholding these silicon etching machines would be difficult for Europe and extremely painful for the Dutch economy, but it would be far more painful for Trump. The U.S. feverish investment in AI and the data centers it relies on will hit a wall if European export controls slow or stop exports to the US and to Taiwan, where NVIDIA produces its most advanced chips. Via this lever, Europe has the means to decide whether and by how much the US economy expands or contracts. Second, and much easier for Europe, is the enforcement of the EU long-neglected data rules against big US tech companies. Europe must join India, Brazil, and China in standing up to Trump. The Brazil president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is an example of how to do so. He has been dignified and resolute in the face of extraordinary bullying from Trump. In a single month, in September, Lula proclaimed in an open letter to Trump that Brazil democracy and sovereignty are not negotiable. The Brazil of Lula countered the Trump tariffs with its own and passed a new law forcing digital platforms to protect children in Brazil from sexual harassment and other online harms. Then Lula rhetorically mugged Trump in a UN General Assembly speech just before the Trump turned to speak. As a result of the Lula refusal to be cowed, Trump softened his tone immediately. Lower tariffs are now expected after negotiations between the two leaders. Trump said earlier in December that he thinks European leaders are weak. He does not believe they will defend the liberties of Europe and their hard-won democracy against him. So far, the response from European leaders is proving him correct. But what Trump does not yet understand is that von der Leyen holds the U.S. economy and his presidency in her hands. She must have the courage to go entirely beyond any prior norms of her behavior. In other words, if she grabs Trump where it hurts, Europe will win this fight. 11H Ukraine. Europe using Russian frozen assets. The Russian central bank in Moscow, Kiev, would only repay the money to the EU if Russia agreed to pay reparations for the damage inflicted during the war. European Union explainer. What is the row about the EU using frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine? Complex plan would involve EU lending 90 billion euros to Ukraine, which some fear could destabilize Eurozone. Putin says move is akin to theft. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 17, 2025. After months of debate, EU leaders will decide on Thursday whether or not to use Russian immobilized assets to fund Ukraine in what could be a make or break moment for Europe. What is the plan? The EU has frozen 210 billion euros, 184 billion pounds, $247 billion of Russian central bank assets, which are mostly held at Euroclear in Brussels. As the fourth anniversary of the full-scale invasion approaches, the EU wants to use this money to generate a loan for Ukraine. Under the complex plan, the EU would borrow from Euroclear to provide Ukraine with an initial 90 billion euro loan, about two-thirds of the Kiev funding needs for 2026 and 2027. The EU expects the Ukraine other allies to provide the rest. Kiev would only repay the money to the EU if and when Russia agreed to pay reparations for the colossal damage inflicted during the war. The EU would then repay Euroclear. Throughout the cycle, Russia would remain the legal owner of the assets. Euroclear, often described as a bank for banks, was until recently a little-known part of global financial plumbing. It is now looking after 40.7 trillion euros worth of assets for its clients, who include central banks, investment banks, and supranational organizations. There is a plan B. EU member states could use unallocated funds in the EU budget as collateral for a loan for Ukraine, a tried and tested method of raising money, which was proposed by the European Commission this month. Belgium, backed by Italy, Bulgaria, and Malta, argues this is a legally safer way to help Kiev, leaving the Russian billions intact for the Ukraine reconstruction. rejection. Other officials involved in the decision argue that frozen assets plan is the only real option. Borrowing secured against the EU budget requires unanimity, and the government against Ukraine of Hungary has already said it would veto such a move. The reparations loan, in contrast, only requires a majority agreement. In theory, Belgium could be outvoted, but high-ranking EU officials have indicated they do not want to go down that road. What happens if there is no agreement? If the summit scheduled to run on Thursday and Friday ends with no clear plan to fund Ukraine, the EU credibility would be in tatters. Europe would find it even harder to sway peace talks orchestrated by a transactional US president who has already dismissed the leaders of the continent. As weak MERS issued a stark warning about the risks of failing to agree the frozen assets plan. If we do not succeed in this, then the European Union ability to act will be severely damaged for years, if not longer, and we will show the world that we are incapable of standing together and acting at such a crucial moment in our history. Even if EU leaders sign off on the frozen assets idea, it would still need to be turned into law to meet Ukraine's urgent military and civilian needs by springtime. Decisions on the immense cost of rebuilding Ukraine, $524 billion, €506 billion by the latest estimate, remain unclear. Any peace agreement also has to resolve the issue of the Ukraine borders and security when Russia shows no obvious interest in ending the war. 11i Ukraine. Europe using Russian frozen assets. The Guardian view on combating Europe. National populists protect the less well-off from the winds of change. Editorial: as EU countries face multiple challenges in a new era, they must fight to preserve the continent's social model. That means a new economic approach. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 15, 2025. More than a year after the election that handed Donald Trump a decisive comeback victory, the Democratic Party has still not released its post-mortem analysis. But last week, an influential progressive lobby group published its own Kamala Harris campaign. Its authors argued failed to connect with core constituencies because it did not focus enough on addressing basic economic anxieties by prioritizing the menace to democracy that MAHA authoritarianism represented. Progressives neglected the bread and butter issues that were uppermost in the minds of many people as the EU braces for a tumultuous period of politics between now and the end of the decade. That is a lesson that needs to be fully absorbed in Brussels, Paris, and Berlin. The White House, as its recently published national security strategy makes clear, is hopeful that patriotic parties in Europe will soon replicate the Trump success in the EU Franco-German engine room. The Marine Le Pen National Rally RN, an alternative for Deutschland AfD, lead the polls backed by large swaths of blue-collar voters, but among mainstream leaders and parties it is hard to discern a response that is adequate to troubling times. The challenges Europe faces are expensive and era-defining. They include the war in Ukraine, maintaining the momentum of the green transition, addressing demographic change, and developing economies that are less vulnerable to bullying by Trump. In China, according to the Brussels-based Bruegel think tank, the new age of geopolitical insecurity could require an additional €250 billion in annual EU defense spending. The Mario Draghi report last year on European economic competitiveness demanded massive investment in public goods and infrastructure to be partly funded by jointly held EU debt. Such a fiscal paradigm shift would boost growth figures that have flatlined for years, but at both the pan-European and national levels there continues to be a lack of boldness when it comes to revenue raising. The EU so-called frugal nations oppose the idea of collective borrowing, and the Brussels budget proposals for the next 7 years are deeply unambitious. In France, the idea of a wealth tax on the super-rich is overwhelmingly popular with voters, but the Emmanuel Macron beleaguered centrist government, though desperate to cut its budget deficit, refuses to contemplate such a move. The reality is that in the absence of such measures, the less comfortable will pay the price of financial adjustment through austerity budgets and greater inequality. Bitter recent disputes over pension cutbacks in both France and Germany testify to a developing struggle over the future of the European social model, a phenomenon that the RN and the AfD have happily exploited to promote a politics of welfare chauvinism. The Ms. Le Pen party, for example, has opposed moves to raise the retirement age and has said that it would target any benefit cuts at non-French nationals. In the U.S., the Trump pledges to protect blue-collar interests were deeply disingenuous, as subsequent Medicaid cuts and tax breaks for the wealthy underlined. But in the absence of a convincing progressive counteroffer from the Harris campaign, they worked on the campaign trail without a fundamental change in economic approach. Social contracts across the continent risk being ripped up. Governments must avoid handing this political gift to the Trumpian forces already on the march in Europe.
Red-green fox here. The quick red-green fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red-green fox here. Ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1. Biofuel Watch. 2. Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3. Comite Schoen Lucht, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4. Dogwood Alliance. 5. Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6. Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7. Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8. Prakaunia Narzexwisistik Istit, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9. Rachel Carson Council. 10. Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.